Welcome. I know everyone is joining. I see a lot of familiar names, familiar faces.
It's always exciting when people come in from all over the place.
Oh, I know.
I was going to ask, can we ask our participants to put in the chat where they're from?
Absolutely. That is the first thing we're going to do.
Okay.
We're just waiting for everyone to be admitted. Erin, are you able to admit all, or do you have to admit one by one? Here we
She's
go.
off.
Excellent. Okay.
Wow.
Yes, as everyone is joining us, if you wouldn't mind sharing your location, your affiliation, your email, LinkedIn profile, how you'd like to connect with others. This is a great way to network and get connected to folks. We are just going to give everyone a minute to join, and then we are going to get started because we do like to try to be on time and we have a lot of great content to share. So in the meantime, for those who don't know me, I'm Maggie Riad. I am the co-chair for the Program and Engagement Committee, which is responsible for putting on these wonderful programs and inviting folks to join us and engage in this great content. So yeah, let's get started. Our mission here at the Encore Network, we champion the civic, social, and economic contributions of people 50 plus. And the whole idea is to create community, stimulate learning, inspire action, remove barriers, and create opportunities. It's a wonderful community, and there's so much to do here. If you're not a member, we'll talk about how you can become a member later. So three quick housekeeping items. Please mute yourself, as I see most of you are. We're going to use the chat for questions and comments. It would help me greatly if you are going to ask a question, if you could start in the chat with either a capital Q or the question symbol. That will help us differentiate comments from questions. And just so everyone knows, we are recording and we will be sending the recording, the slides, and all the resources mentioned and in the chat afterwards. Okay, so to get started, we decided that today's event is sponsored in memory of Jan Hively, and we have a special guest, Moira Allen, who is a South African based in Paris, and she co-founded the Global Pass It On Network with Jan in 2013. And the goal was to promote positive aging across 60 countries. Today, Moira works in the aging field thanks to Jan, whom she met at the first Positive Aging Conference in 2007. So I'm going to turn it over to Moira to tell us a little bit about Jan and why we were so inspired to have her be the sponsorship for today's event.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity to talk about Jan. As you say, I met Jan for the first time 18 years ago in Florida, and we got talking. And within the first hour, I totally realized that I had met somebody extremely special. We both believe the same thing, and that is that older adults have wisdom and energy to contribute, not just needs to be met. What I didn't know at that point in time was that Jan would become my closest collaborator, my mentor, and one of my dearest friends. Jan did something quite remarkable. At age 69, she earned her PhD from the University of Minnesota. Now, most people would probably think that that's an excellent way to cap a career that was already packed with all sorts of things, but not Jan. That was for her a starting point, the starting block on her next career, which was all about aging and agency for older people. It was a new beginning. Her research had shown that something troubling, that neither older adults themselves nor society saw aging as useful. But she also found that older adults who stayed curious, who kept teaching and learning, lived meaningful lives. That became her mission. And she had this phrase that we all know at the Pass It On Network and way beyond that, and that was meaningful work, paid or unpaid, through the last breath. And she lived that every single day. Over the next decade, she co-founded 3 networks dedicated to empowering older adults, co-developed advocacy leaderships, and led wisdom circles, and surprised audiences in conferences around the world with her ideas and especially with her passion. Working with Jan taught me what real partnership looks like. If you looked at her resume, everything had co in it. She co-founded, co-developed, co-authored, and that wasn't just professional courtesy. That's exactly how she worked. She believed that the best work that could be done was collaboration. We spent 6 years developing the Pass It On network, and Jan was patient with the process. But she kept coming up with things like, what if we connected advocates from all over the world? And what if we could learn directly from each other? Those were the ideas that seemed impossible to me to start with, but that's exactly what has happened. We launched our network in 2013, and it's grown absolutely brilliantly. Today we have advocates, or as we call them, pioneers, in over 60 countries, sharing ideas, adapting programs, and solving problems together. Jan had this gift for seeing around corners. She wanted to include in the draft for the United Nations Convention on Older People's Rights a statement that makes sure that we didn't portray older adults as people who just need care, but as an active force for shaping the next generations. That was Jan, always thinking ahead, always looking for the possibility that others missed. I have to be honest, losing her has been very hard. She was the person that I called on when there was any problem. She was the one person who reminded me why this work mattered so much. When I got discouraged, she encouraged me. She celebrated the small victories and pushed for the big ones. But Jan taught me something very important about partnerships. The best ones don't end, they change. The foundation we build together is solid. Her belief that older adults are society's greatest untapped resource, her commitment to peer-to-peer learning, her vision of aging as potential rather than decline, all of that continues. Throughout her life, she kept asking questions that mattered most. How do we help older adults see their own value? How do we build leadership that brings different generations together? She'd want us all to keep asking those questions, to keep looking for answers together. The Pass It On network will continue because Jan co-created something bigger than herself. She showed all of us, whether you knew her personally or whether you're just learning about her now, that meaningful work really can continue through the last breath. That collaboration creates stronger solutions than any of us can build alone, and that aging isn't about stepping back, it's about stepping forward with purpose. Jan made me a better partner, a better advocate, and a better friend. She left our world a better place than she found it. And her vision lives on in all of us who continue this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maura. And thank you to all those who contributed as part of the sponsorship plan for this event and in memory of Jan. So now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Helen Hirsch Spence. After devoting 35 years to increasingly senior leadership positions in both public and private education sector, Helen embarked on a journey of social entrepreneurship. She founded Top 60 Over 60, which provides thought leadership, consulting, and training on longevity strategies for businesses, the multi-generational workforce, and for adults in transition. Helen is an author. The book is coming in 2026. She publishes articles, speaks at conferences, and organizes events to inspire and encourage a reframed understanding of what it means to age in the 21st century. And her recent TEDx talk reached over 100,000 in the first 4 weeks. So it is my honor and pleasure.
Maggie, you went.
Sorry. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Helen Hirsch Spence.
Thanks, Maggie. Before I start on the slides, I just want to say to everyone that Jan was a powerful influence in my life. I had the pleasure of meeting her in 2018 at a conference in Toronto, and she immediately pulled me in and encouraged me. And like Moira said, she was an inspiration, and I feel her loss as well. So fortunately, I'm still connected to the Pass It On network. So let me start and also let you know, hold on, that we had a little miscommunication in that I thought this was going to be an hour and an hour and a half, and that's what I prepared, but I'm going to shorten it dramatically so that we have time to talk, and I'll skip over slides. So if you see me running through something quickly, know that that's what I was doing, and that's the reason why I was doing it. So I thought that Rethink Aging was appropriate because we have a whole new map of life to uncover and a longevity bonus of about 30 years. And yet we continue to cling to that old narrative from the 20th century. Not much has changed in the way in which we think about it, the majority anyway, and the way our policies are designed, all of which needs to be reframed. When retirement was undertaken in the 1935, 65 was a reward for living longer than 62, which was the average age. Today in North America, between 78 and 82 is the average. And there's discussion about whether or not it's going down or going up, but hopefully it's going up soon, if not in the immediate present. And young children today have an average life expectancy of 100 years. So we really do need to rethink what it means to age in the 21st century. But that's not necessarily happening. So we have a quick poll for you, which Erin's going to put out. And I ask you to quickly answer it. Can everybody see the results as they come in?
No. Yes,
No.
I'll share the results when they come in.
Okay. Okay.
I was waiting for a few last responses.
I think we have enough.
Can you see the
Yeah, so
Can everybody-
experience, cognitive decline, and dementia scored the highest with 69% of respondents. And then the others are equal, ending up in an institution, old age home, physical or chronic pain, and loneliness at 10% each.
So I think what we see and what was just verified is that it's fear of that cognitive decline, but we have to realize that fear is at the base of that bias against growing old. But really the facts tell a completely different story. Another question, when do you become old? if there are a couple of people who are willing to just speak out, if they have any particular answer, that would be great.
So, Helen, we actually, before we go there, there were a
Yeah.
couple of other options in the chat. So,
Oh, okay.
finances was a big fear, and then the experience or burden for my spouse. So, becoming a burden for your spouse. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm just going to tell you the research that we've conducted in sort of action research and at conferences, and when I ask this question in workshops, almost every time I get more words that are negative rather than positive. If I asked you to identify 3 words to describe old, and I won't do that right now in the interest of time, typically this is what comes up. It's the narrative of the elderly as we saw it and perceived it last century, and what tends to still be the case. We are a culture that worships youth. Things are changing. We're seeing more and more older images of people in advertisements, on television, in magazines, in a positive way, but it's a slow change. But it is, in fact, changing. And if you think about it, we have tons of descriptors for children between the ages of 0 and 20. For instance, we have infant, we have toddler, we have preschooler, we have school age, we have pre-adolescent, adolescent, teenagers, tweens, and all of that helps us describe the different stages of childhood. Yet we don't have very many descriptors for old age or older age. And we need to actually, I think, work on that so that we understand that words really do frame our perspectives. If more people were to describe old as using any of these words, we would have fewer ageist comments and it wouldn't be nearly as pervasive as age already has been. So as Maggie said, if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the chat. I can't see you, so I'm advancing blind here. So if there's anything you want to add, as I say, in the interest of time, I'm just pushing through some of these notions because I really want to get to, what can we do about it? I think this is an interesting breakdown of different ways in which we talk about age. Mostly, we speak in terms of chronological age, which is the age that we, from birth onto our last breath. Almost everything is determined, policies and so on, by chronological age, although that probably isn't as accurate. If we were to look at our functional age, and I'm curious, how many of you are aware that there are so many different definitions or descriptions of age? Until I started doing a lot of the research that I've done, I was unaware of the nuances. And I think it's really important to remember it and also to help other people understand that, we're not just defined by our chronological age. When you think of our biological age, or when you think of how significant our systems, our biological systems work, for instance, what glucose levels do we have? So biological age is looking at some of those metrics about respiratory capacity, blood pressure. All of those things dictate what our biological age is. I recently was tested for strength training, and according to the trainer, he said that my biological age was such and such. Well, being 76, which is what I am now, and being told that my biological age based on my strength was 51, I was thrilled. But I know that that's not the whole picture by any means. The psychosocial age is equally important, and that has to do with the cognitive abilities that we have with regard to learning and memory, and then social is how do we control our emotions? Are we raging, or can we control ourselves? That's really part of the psychosocial component of aging. And then there's the social, which is also, looks at maturity. But I have to say that's very culturally determined, because we know perfectly well that in many countries, such as Sudan, a child who's 6 is responsible for his younger siblings, whereas that would never be the case probably in North America. So our functional age really is uh, the holistic view of what it means to age, and includes our biological, psychosocial, and social age. And yet, I'm not sure if we always take that into consideration. So age is complex, really is. I'm going to move on just briefly to ageism to help people understand. I think most of you who are on this call are well aware that it was Neil Butler who came up with and coined the phrase ageism. What I find fascinating is that it was only in 1969 that we had a description of what it is that's going on as we age. And when I speak to teenagers, and that happens really often at conferences or meetings and so on, they often come up to me afterwards and they said they never heard of ageism. They're very aware of social justice. They're very aware of homophobia, sexism, and racism, but they didn't know that ageism existed. And that's something I think we really have to work on, because we have to work across generations more so that we can get rid of some of these ageist biases. Let's take a look at some of the typical types of ageism. And the reason I want to speak a bit about this, although I'm pretty sure that most of you are aware of it, is that the impact of ageism is so dramatic, and yet I think we underplay it, generally speaking. The World Health Organization came out with a study in 2021 in which it stated that 1 out of 2 people worldwide were ageist against older adults. Now, we know that there's ageism against younger people as well. I'm not talking about that kind of ageism today, although it's pervasive too, especially in the workplace. I'm really talking about the ageism that affects older adults. And what tends to be the most significant in terms of health and chronic disease is internalized or self-directed ageism, which is the beliefs that we have imbibed or integrated into our belief system throughout our lives. And I have to say that probably those of us who are older, and I'm including myself because I know it's true, I probably have more biases than somebody who's in their 20s, because I was exposed to messages throughout my life that told me that aging meant decline. So it limits our potential, it destroys our confidence, it causes isolation and depression and cognitive decline. So internalized and self-directed ageism is pretty important to recognize. And I have to also admit that the reason I went down this path with Top 60 Over 60 was because it was only in my late 60s that I realized that my own negative feelings about my potential or what am I going to do next all were really internalized ageism. And when I realized that that was happening to me, and I had had leadership roles in the past, of all the reason that I should have self-confidence and was losing it rapidly, I started doing the research that I did. And ever since, I feel infinitely more positive, and I hope that you will too at the end of this. So we have also everyday ageism, which manifests itself in so many different ways. Typically microaggressions, such as brief verbal or nonverbal or environmental incidents that convey hostility or a lack of value or narrow stereotypes about older adults. Think of all the birthday cards that you see for older adults. Typically, they're jokes, or they make fun of something related to being older. And although I sometimes still choose them, I make sure that I'm choosing them for the right person, and I explain or say, I know that this is ageist, but I just can't get into the flowery ones at this point. And fortunately, there's somebody who's coming up with different kinds of older adult images, and I think her name is Jan Golden. Maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. So everyday ageism is pervasive as well. I think gendered ageism we're familiar with. It is a combination of both sexism and ageism, and it disproportionately affects older women. And you'll see this in many different ways, especially in the workplace, when you see that women make a huge effort not to look their age if they're over 50, because we know that women over the age of 45 in particular have a much longer time re-entering the workforce if for some reason they're out. They're nudged out earlier because of ageism, and they're deeply affected. We'll talk about that a bit more. But if we think about it, it makes sense that women have colored their hair for as long as they have, or try to use creams, wrinkle creams, and so on, because if they were in the workforce, they know that their time sometimes is limited. Institutional ageism, I think we're familiar with, policies. If you're an older entrepreneur, such as I am, starting only at age 67, it was hard to get insurance. You can't get loans as easily. Policies such as driving and marriage and drinking, all of those kinds of age limits may make sense. In Canada, judges have to retire at age 75. And I know there are restrictions on pilots as well. Some of these make sense. We want to have them, but others are really restrictive. And then there's elder speak, which encompasses a whole host of different types of microaggressions again. For instance, the healthcare sector is particularly guilty of patronizing or infantilizing older adults, especially if they're in institutions or in residences. Perhaps some of you have had the experience of going to the doctor who will tell you, you know what, Helen, you've managed your whole life. You don't need to change anything now, when in fact the symptom could be fixed or could be prevented. If you go with a younger person to see a doctor in a hospital, very often the doctor will speak to the the adult child rather than to the person themselves. So those are examples of of elder speak. It's particularly dangerous because it affects the way in which we treat older adults and leads to elder abuse. Just quickly, here's a slide that shows that 82% of individuals who between the ages of 50 and 80 experience at least one form of ageism every day. I'm sure some of you have seen these comments, or heard them. The thing is, what do you do about them? And that's what you have control over. And that's how we have to rethink a lot of what we know about aging. I think some of the things that we don't understand are the negative impacts that we have. I'm going really fast, and I don't know what time it is, Maggie, because I can't see anything. How are we doing?
We're at 12:29, so you're doing good.
Okay. Okay. We wanted to allow time for people to speak as well. You can now. So I talked briefly about some of the self-directed ageist impacts. I think it's really important to recognize that financial security, which somebody mentioned in the chat, was very, very significant, especially given the fact that we're living so much longer. Even if we did retire, I don't know, I keep seeing in the New York Times advertising for how long do you think $1 million will last for a retired person? It's a good question because our dollars aren't worth as much as they used to. So there's also, as I mentioned, the physical and mental well-being, and the fact that it impacts dramatically our memory and our lifespan. And all of this has to do with mindset, which I'll get into in a minute. In terms of society, the exclusion of older workers from employment and training opportunities really reduces the labor market part of economies, for instance. And I mention that because in the next frame there with economic, we're losing tax revenues and we increasingly rely on welfare programs. And all of these are costs that we accrue as a whole society and also as an economy. But probably one of the most dramatic things that happens is that because we have become so age segregated in the 20th century, or age siloed by separating older people out into residences. And Sun City, which I think was established in the 1960s in the United States, which was sort of the first community for older people. I mean, it was done for all the right reasons. And we know now that we have very many senior residences. The intentions are all good. The problem, however, is that we disconnect from other generations, which causes rifts and misunderstandings, which are not often easily remediated. And those generational divisions, we're seeing that very often, are now competing for the same kinds of resources from governments and so on that really needs to be distributed widely. But I think that probably the biggest issue has to do with, the transfer of wisdom, of experience, of knowledge. When we had multi-generational families living together, which was the case, until after World War II. And yet I think we're going to be going back to that out of necessity. We had those connections, and children were often brought up by their grandparents, and they still are in many different countries around the world. It's just not normalized here to the same extent. So the economic burden is huge for the most part because we're not valuing the contributions that these older adults can still contribute to society, whether it's employment or it's voluntary work. And so as a result, we all lose. And I have costs there, for instance, estimated by the OECD and then in the United States for healthcare alone. But I think the numbers are far greater, and they have a much greater impact than what we can do and say. So I wanted to ask you, and maybe before I go to the next slide, if there's anybody, if somebody is so talking about ageism, how do you respond to ageist comments? Sorry, it went backwards instead of forwards. Here are a couple of ideas that I've put out there, but maybe some others have other ideas, I really do think that we have a responsibility to call it out. We can do that gently, or we can do it less gently, let's put it that way, by saying, oh my God, that's an ageist comment. If somebody gives you a backhanded compliment such as, oh, Maggie, you look great for your age. Sometimes what I have done is I've responded in kind and I've said, yeah, Jennifer, you look great for your age too. And that seems to get people to think twice about what they're saying. Or I say, yeah, for 76, I feel terrific, or I look terrific. Or I just ask, what do you mean by that? Somehow we need to bring to everybody's attention, that comments that are commonplace, that aren't necessarily intended to be negative, they're microaggressions, but they have macro impact. Ageism is so pervasive, it's normalized, and it's socially accepted. And until some of us speak out nicely, if we can, it's going to continue.
So we have a few comments in the chat. A lot of folks said, why do you feel that way, or what do you mean? So asking an engaging question. This one was funny. I laughed. I chuckled, Jennifer. She said, how do you think you'll look when you're my age?
Oh, that's good. That's a really good one. Yeah.
So then we do have a point being made. If you call it out in some companies, you could be risking your job. Human resources will not support you. So maybe differentiate between like a generally social setting versus at work.
It's interesting, that comment, because, and maybe we can talk about it more later, but in my My understanding is that employers are not allowed to, there's legislation against um, retirement and comments that are ageist. Having said that, I know that doesn't really matter because you are still guilty of saying something that somebody doesn't want to hear. Yeah.
And then one other comment says, I call it out. I say that I don't like to think or talk that way. That's a nice way of just taking control and saying it from an I perspective versus a you perspective.
Great suggestions. I'm sure there are lots more too. So let's move on to the kinds of things that we can actually.
Sorry, I got it. We have a question.
Go ahead.
Which countries are leading the way in an age-inclusive, age-positive society with policies, employment, training, etc.?
So maybe there are other people on this call who can put an answer in the chat. My understanding is that Singapore is one of the countries that is more advanced in this way because they have so many more older people. In Japan, too, those are the two oldest societies, as far as I know. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're confronting it, they're tackling it, they're trying to deal with it. I think Japan has raised its retirement age to 70, and I think they encourage individuals also to stay in the workforce and work with employers to retrain or to recognize that they can't afford to lose their employees. But maybe there's somebody on this call who has a better idea. I know that Europe is ahead of us because they're a little bit older in some countries, but how they're dealing with it institutionally, I'm not sure.
Someone mentioned the Norwegian countries.
Right. Yeah, the Scandinavian countries. Yeah. Yeah, Finland's always been ahead of most countries with education, and I think that they are also probably ahead when it comes to older adults. But I think also that they have a lot of immigration, so they may have a younger population in some regards. So it really has to do with a number of different factors. The reality, however, is worldwide we are aging, and that by mid-century there will be a lot more older people, even in the underdeveloped South. Now that's the primary location where there are younger people, but they're aging too. And in the developing countries, they also are aging. So this is not something that's going to be reside only in North America. It's common globally, and yet most countries are not age ready yet. So excuse me, I just want to talk briefly about mindset because this is really the key factor. You know, it's a person's established set of beliefs and attitudes and assumptions that shape how they perceive the world and how they think, feel, and act. So, you know, changing beliefs has a profound impact on the way in which we age, frankly, because it permeates every part of our life. And our personality really grows sometimes out of our mindset, and it prevents us sometimes from fulfillment and for doing what we want. So Becca Levy has done extensive studies. She's from Yale, and she's a doctor. And I think it's something like 2,200 studies were done, and they were from everywhere, not just from the United States. And she was able to determine that with a positive mindset towards aging, we can extend life by 7.5 years. I also have read, and I know it's true, that having negative thoughts about aging is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So these are things over which we do have control. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over what Carol Dweck has identified as fixed and growth mindsets, but I think we know that having a fixed mindset about aging negatively has a fixed impact on our health as well. So I'm just skipping through this. And there you can just look at some of the things with a growth mindset. And these line up with, what Becca Levy and others have discovered. So here are, I have questions, about the inputs. What is it that shapes your values, your attitudes, behaviors, the kinds of things you have control over, that you need to think about? Perhaps not now, but reflect on some of these things as we go forward. If you think really about the people that you hang out with, think of the TV shows, think of the podcasts, the magazines, the media, think of social media. All of those things are inputs into the way in which you formulate your belief system and your mindset. Probably most significant is think about the 5 people who you are closest to or who you spend the most time with. They are probably a good reflection of who you are, because we need people in our midst who are going to lift us up, not bring us down. And the minute we recognize that this person is toxic, unless it's a husband or a partner or a wife, which is more difficult to remove from your presence, we need to be conscious of these things because they have a huge, huge impact on the way in which we view ourselves and how we internalize what it means to grow older. Your success may have nothing to do with having the right skills or anything to do with what you know. It may just be from the people that you are doing the things with. So consider that, because these are the inputs that you actually have, that you have control over.
So
I'm
Helen,
going
we
to,
have a couple
yeah.
of questions and a comment. So just to stick with your input content,
Mhm.
one input would be developing your purpose in life.
Absolutely.
And then we have a couple of questions. The first one, is it okay for a supervisor to frequently ask, when are you retiring? I'm just trying to plan for your replacement ahead of you leaving.
That's and I don't know if I mentioned it here or I meant to. Those are nudges, and they're very ageist, because what it does is it undermines your confidence. The minute the person you may have been thinking of not retiring for another 10 years, but the minute somebody says something like that to you, it undermines you. I'd suggest that, first of all, you let them know, if you can, nicely, that you don't intend to retire for another 10 years or so,
Mhm.
and stop
Don't
asking that
mention a
question.
number.
What?
Don't even mention a number.
No, you don't have to measure, but if you really want to put them off, or that they tell them that they don't need to think about a replacement for now.
Yes. Okay, and then the next question. Oh, just a second. Sorry, it just went off my screen. Are there certain industries that are more open to hiring older workers? As you mentioned early on, we have wisdom, energy, and life experiences that are valuable in the workplace.
I wish I could answer that question honestly and indicate a few. I know that there are some big organizations that are now looking at what I call longevity literacy, but there aren't very many. That's kind of the work that I look to do to help them understand that productivity increases, innovation increases. There's a transfer of knowledge when you have older people in the workforce. We need to help employers understand that by retaining older employees and upskilling them, or giving them opportunities, flexibility to work the way in which they want to, we can retain a lot of older adults that we want to retain. I think typically we've always thought of pushing people out because they are not doing a good job. Well, the time has come when we really need to work with those people if they haven't done the right job, a great job. We need to give them performance appraisals throughout their working lives and help them figure out ways in which they can maximize their performance, because there's nobody coming up to replace some of these older people, and we need that knowledge. But I can't give you any specifics. I could, but I can't now because I'm not thinking in those those terms. But I can gladly get back to you. Anything else?
Nope, I think we're good. We'll take another pause in a couple minutes. And just so you
Okay.
know, we're at 12:46.
Okay. Okay, and wrap this up. I wanted to talk a bit more about the changes in the aging brain, and I'll just say very quickly that the brain is smaller. It peaks at age 30. And so there's slower speed of processing, and there's sometimes challenges with working memory. But we now have gained crystallized intelligence, which is based on the facts based on facts and rooted in experience. So as we age, we accumulate new knowledge, understanding, and our crystallized intelligence becomes stronger. When we're young, we have what's referred to as fluid intelligence. And fluid intelligence involves being able to think and reason abstractly and solve problems. We can do this when we're older too, but this ability is independent of learning, experience, and education. So that's fluid intelligence, and it peaks also at about 30. What we need to recognize is that crystallized intelligence grows throughout age, starts in childhood and continues to grow and expand. So we have crystallized intelligence up into our 70s and 80s. But some things do change. We have more brain cells and connections. We have greater cognitive reserve. Here, let me show you. These are some of the benefits of having a brain that's been around for a while. You know, we have greater single task focus. On the contrary, we don't have as much multitasking ability as we did before. However, we've got, we get the gist of things much more quickly. Our brains are functioning differently. The two hemispheres, right and left, work much better together as we age than when we were younger. We have greater emotional regulation, which means that many times, and maybe you've noticed it, I certainly have, you start to lose your ego. You want to transfer your understanding and experience to younger people. You want to give back to society. In other words, contribute more meaningfully, leave a legacy. All of those things are significant. And we have multi-perspective problem-solving skills. So those are all huge, huge benefits that I think we need to become more conscious of so that we can remember them and not think about when we forgot our keys in the other room that 30-year-olds do too. And it's not uncommon. I always talk about this positive view of aging as the longevity mindset. As Becca Levy pointed out, it can add 7.5 years to our life. And if we have a positive view of aging, we think in terms of potential growth, expansion, rather than decline. And if we adapt to, and lifelong learning, which means that we embrace age change and we're curious and we keep on moving. Somebody just mentioned purpose and meaning. Those are absolutely critical for us to stay fulfilled and live better and longer. Finding what our purpose and meaning is. And oftentimes I've given some courses on this. It's so instructive that people don't think in terms of purpose or contribution until later in life very often. The other thing is cultivating those intergenerational connections keeps us in touch with what's going on today. But the fact is that things are changing technologically so quickly that many young people can't keep up either. But those are the kinds of things that we need to remember are not necessarily negatives, but everybody's experiencing them. And we've got to just do our very best and be optimistic and resilient with regard to some of these challenges, and have perspective, be resourceful, have a hopeful outlook. And future orientation just means that, you think in terms of your own future potential and that you continue to be engaged. So that social engagement piece is extremely strong. These are the kinds of things that we have control over if we're aware of them, which we are becoming more and more, and there's more and more research. So as I said before, reduces cognitive decline. It helps to heal faster if we have a positive mindset or a longevity mindset. Longevity mindset means that you accept your longer life as the new normal, and that you're not thinking in terms of, retirement at 65 and sitting on a beach for the next 30 years, which you wouldn't want to do anyway. So I want to stop in a moment with this next slide. We need to shift the public discourse about aging. And we all have a responsibility. So think about this. Who do you talk to? What platforms are you using? What are you going to say when somebody makes an ageist remark? What concrete steps can you take? And if we were all to think about 2 things that we will start to do differently, perhaps, or that we'll stop doing consciously because we know that we have a certain bias, or 2 things you'll keep doing, we will probably make a lot more progress. And Ageism Awareness Day is coming up on the 9th of October, and the International Day of Older Persons is coming up on October 1st. So the other thing is that this happens to be the UN's Decade of Healthy Aging. So there are all sorts of reasons why we really should embrace our age and look towards a future that's going to be longer and better, which sometimes is not within our control. I often like to end the session with this, which you're probably familiar with. Who do you see? How many of you see a young lady first or an old lady? And be interesting if you could put that in the chat for me. I have a number of other slides that I'll share with those of you who want to stick around, but I'd like to hear your comments, your questions, and keep going as long as you want to. And I understand that people have to leave at 1 o'clock. No offense will be taken, but those who want to stick around longer to discuss some of these things, please do.
So the majority said young.
Young. Okay, great. Okay. Do you see the old lady though?
I saw her right away.
You saw her right away?
First, but then the old.
Sometimes people can't see one or the other. So it's interesting. I see, Barbara, you have your hand up, huh? You're on mute. You're not on mute. You're on mute.
Am I off?
You are. Hi.
Hi, Helen. That was wonderful. Thank you for such a superb presentation. I know you were squeezed into a tight time frame. What boggles my mind is that our generation has more money than other generations. And I can't believe that we can't strategically come up with a plan and get advertisers to advertise what this age looks like, what this age does. I love my COVID white hair. I don't want to look like I did when I was 30, 40, 50, or even 60. I'm pushing 80, and I love it. And I'm more active and engaged in meaningful work. Why isn't that out there? Why aren't there billboards all over highways in your country, in our country, promulgating the work that people of our age do? Why aren't we on TV shows? Why aren't we on the talk shows talking about what we do? People don't know what we do. It's the best kept secret in the world. So it's our fault too. We need to be spokespeople for what we can do with our knowledge, experience, energy. We need more intergenerational work where younger people and older people combine their knowledge and their skill sets. I mean, we can do this. And that we're not doing it is shame on us. Now, there are commercials on TV. I can't think of the one where the guy keeps saying, "Oh my God, they're acting like their parents." He's trying to sell a house or something. And every time I see it, I yell at the TV. We've got to get that commercial off of television. Why aren't we writing letters to the network saying this is demeaning? We don't want this kind. Why aren't we putting together commercials that show us in the very best light? I'm looking at all of you and saying, let's get together and do this. This is absurd. They treat us like we're half dead. Oh, you look so nice today. I said, I think I looked nice yesterday too. I mean, I love humor. So I always interject humor. But we need to share our mindsets, our ideas, or try this. I just tried this angle the other day and it blew this very arrogant person away. So let's do it. Helen, I'm with you. Let's talk.
Well, okay, Barbara, I just want you to know, I wish there were more Canadians on this call. I don't think there are. I would like to march on Parliament Hill the way we used to for civil rights, because all of us are that age, to promote International Day of Older Persons. Sorry, I see hands are up. Lynn?
So I'm sorry, just one
Oh,
quick
yeah.
second for those that have to leave.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just wind down the official portion and then those that can stay. We do have a couple of events coming up, so please check out our website and you can see those details. And also for anyone who would like to contribute, if you're not already a member, you can text to let me just get the information. I'll put it in the chat. And then last but not least, if you would like to become a member of the Encore Network, we will also be sending that information out because this is where we foster those kinds of conversations and support each other to take action. All right. Let's, that way those that need to leave at the top of the hour can do so.
Sure. And thank you I just want to say thank you to those who came for joining us today. And any comments or feedback, please get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so I have Lynn Coles has her hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you so much. And I apologize I'm off camera, but I thought we would be. So I think I'm just better off camera today. First off, so lovely to meet my tribe, and I'm so grateful to be here. I've wanted something like this and felt alone in this. So much resonated, Helen, and thank you for doing this. I remember when you did this, I think one of your very first group chats of this nature was a few years ago, and you were just getting started. So kudos to you for leading the charge. I wanted to call out a couple things I'm doing and resources that might be helpful. So here in Canada, I'm based in Toronto, and I've been in IT. I was in cybersecurity until most recently, and I'm building a new life for myself and a new practice as a coach. And interestingly, my demographic that wants me is age 35. I'll turn 65, God willing, in the beginning of November. So in terms of Barbara's comment around advertisers, and that's so profoundly true. What I found is a British woman, Jacqueline Bassett, and she's got a whole movement in England called Ageism is Never in Style. I spend most of my day on LinkedIn. So I've started following, I repost, and I'm at that funny, cowardly point where I want to call it out more on LinkedIn and be a voice to it. And at the same time, I'm actually still getting job interviews. So you don't want to out yourself in some way, right? Even though as soon as you hire my ass, you're going to know my age because you'll have to have my social, insurance number. But anyway, I did want to call out for Barbara and others who are interested. Ageism is never in style, and they've really made some groundwork on changing that narrative and showing how healthy we all are. And the other person I've been connecting with here in Canada is Senator Tony Lafreda. And now our government system is such that yes, you have an elected representative and then we have a Senate. But I've reached out to him because he's posting a lot on employee ownership. So guess what? I thought, here I am aging. I'm super smart. I've got sales, I've got marketing, I've got so much to offer. And I'm watching these companies get sold to private equity all over the world. Americans and Canadians buy each other's companies up in equal enthusiasm. So it's just done. But as these companies get gobbled up, they throw everybody out of work. And the future generation who needs these jobs and us who need to share what we know how to do about running a business they're gutting it out both ways. So I'm connecting on if you picture the Venn diagram, I'm connecting on an area called employee ownership because
Excuse me,
that also
Lynn.
relates. Sorry.
Lynn, can
Yeah,
you, in the interest of time and other people who may want to say
sorry.
something, this
Okay.
is very important. Can you write some of this information down in the
I
chat
sure will. Yeah.
and get in touch with me, and then we can continue that conversation. But what applies to everybody, it's hard to get it unless you write it down, so it would be valuable.
Of course, I'll do that into the chat and connect with you after. But
All
thank you
right.
for this, and being a voice, as we're all recognizing, is so key. We've got to use our voices. Thank you.
And thank you for your commitment. And I look forward to connecting with you,
Thank
being
you.
in Canada. Okay, thank you. Jennifer, I think you're next, huh?
Hello, all. Helen, thank you so much for such a breathless presentation, but so rich. I actually am going to be leading the Encore Network's coffee hour on October 1st, when we will be celebrating International Day of
Oh,
Aging.
great. Yeah.
Framed around the book I just published called Rebel Aging, because I really believe that this mindset piece is absolutely fundamental. We can't fight institutions, or we can't take on institutions and convince them of new practices if we're not incorporating that for ourselves and for our circles and building that new awareness. And so I think that the beliefs and actions piece, not looking for others, but really internalizing, what am I going to do about my own ageism? And I mean, I hate it in the morning when I have a little blip. I'm going, should I really be wearing that? I'm like, Jen, that's ageist. What the heck? Like, it's still there.
Of course it is.
Of course. So, I think we have to keep holding the mirror up to ourselves daily, as we also look externally to see what we can do, because the benefits, the mutual benefits, are enormous as we engage and have that confidence for ourselves and that resilience. So I'll pop the Rebel Aging into the chat as well.
Yeah,
But
please do.
I really wanted to appreciate all that you've done and all that you've brought to us today, and you bring more widely. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So since we do have
Oh,
a good audience still, would anybody else like to speak or have any questions for Helen? We get her wisdom here for another 25 minutes or so.
I have a couple of other slides I could share, but not necessarily. I'd rather have a conversation with the people that are here, asking questions, or go ahead, Amy.
So, Helen, what are some specific things? I mean, I have a group of friends. I loved your comment about who you surround yourself with makes a difference. At the same time, my best friend is exhausting in this regard,
Yeah.
and not in a positive way. So I walk
Yeah.
with her. I try and turn the conversation around. But what have you found works? And I'd be curious what other people really do say and do. And I loved Barbara Shaman's idea. I mean,
Yeah.
let's unite and go after these advertisers. I mean, when I watch Jeopardy, I want to throw up, because I don't like those ads. And so I'm just curious, is there something? I'm a big believer in small steps. So what have you found? What do you recommend? We have a great group of people here. What's one thing you'd say, go ahead and do this?
Well, I have decided. I realized how toxic some of the people are that I surround myself with, and I am now deliberately avoiding those kinds of experiences, or minimizing them anyway. I mean, I'm not going to change them. I know that. but I don't want to necessarily hang around with you anymore. But I won't say it, but my actions, by not showing up. And I'm doing that. I'm finding since the research and how 5 people really are a reflection of who you are, the 5 people you're closest to. I'm very conscious of who I hang out with. But other people may have other ideas. I see Lynette has her hand up, but do you want to speak to this, Lynette?
Well, I just have a question. What do you do when it's family?
Yeah, well, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's I have a son-in-law and daughter who yeah,
Yep.
and I don't know how to move away from them and still maintain contact with my grandson.
Yeah. It's really hard.
It is hard.
Mm, I don't know. I don't know. Um, I know of people in my midst too that I can't get away from, but I try to minimize the conversations that I hear from them that indicate that they don't look forward to aging or whatever. So I try to avoid those kinds of conversations. And when they start down that path, I'll say, you know what? I don't believe this is all about the way in which you're thinking about it. It's your mindset. Your mindset is not positive, and so it's not helpful for me to hear that. So let's not talk about it. That's what I've done.
I recently
Okay, thank you.
I recently had a conversation with my adult children who are always making fun of us.
Oh,
I told them, I said, it's a reality that we're all going to age. And honestly, I wish I had taken more control earlier. And look, you have that opportunity now. And it changes the tone of the conversation. And in that moment, nothing was said, but I have noticed that my adult kids will now ask me, what would you have done differently? So I think our expectation should not be that we're going to control the conversation immediately, but by planting positive, encouraging seeds, they will come around.
yeah. I'm having trouble with my grandchildren who are 6, 7, and 8 and about that age. And they know that I'm doing this work about ageism. And then when I walked them once to school recently, the older one said to his friend, or said to me while his friend was there, Oma, don't go off on your ageism speech. So, but he still teases me. But anyway, I hope it's a tease. But other examples.
He's definitely listening.
Yeah, he is listening. You're right.
Yeah.
And he does get it. And whenever they say something like that, and so I have 3 grandchildren, 7, 9, and 11 now. They forget that I'm the one who taught them how to ski, taught them how to swim, and all of those things. So I remind them of that, and then they stop also just, for a moment anyway, and they think about it. Charles, who hates me because I haven't gotten to the information he needs.
So yes, my question is really simple.
Yeah.
Am I the only one in the aging space that is concentrating on the public sector governments who are worse? And so that's my sort of question.
I'm not sure I understand. You mean your focus about ageism is in the public sector? Is that it?
Yep, and governments, right.
And government. Well, I know that I reach out and I meet up with members of parliament and senators and so on. I think a lot of people in this space do. I don't think
Right,
that there's a lot of
but
success.
have they measured the governments? I mean, governments all have this freedom of information, so you can go out there and see, who they hire, who they fire, who their current ages are. So everything you want to know about the intergenerational workforce is simply sitting right in the government's employment systems. And so is anybody doing that to see, are the governments worse than the private sector? Are they worse than the advertisers? Are they worse than the tech industry? I mean, is anybody out there actually looking at the governments themselves to see if they're worse than everybody else?
I can't answer that. And that's about data. And that wouldn't be, I mean, that informs everything. You're absolutely right. Does anybody know about any work that's being done in the government field, keeping track? You might be the soldier that we need, Charles.
Yeah, and maybe it's a good prompt for those of us, like we're in Illinois. We could be looking at Illinois stats, and I know there's folks here from Colorado and Boston. So,
Good point. Thank you. Anybody else have a question or a comment or discussion point or whatever? Or we've exhausted perhaps the conversation at this point.
there is a very interesting event coming up on podcasting as well. I encourage you all to check the website. We have a lot of great events coming. I didn't have a chance to share those slides, but in the interest of time, we'll focus on questions if anybody has any more while we have Helen. But this was a great turnout and a lot of great engagement. So thank you all for your attention and your time.
Super. Well, thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you,
being here.
Helen. That was awesome.
You're
Clearly,
gonna stay on. You're gonna stay on,
yeah,
and Eric's gonna stay on. Okay, that's great.
I'll stay
Thank
on.
you for being here and for showing your faces. Those of you who are getting on to say goodbye, and get in touch, please. Love to hear from you.